3 years. It doesn't sound like much when you count them on a calendar, but for Renata, they stretched on endlessly, 3 years filled with sacrifice, with days and nights lived not for herself but for her only son and his young wife. At 71, she should have been resting, enjoying the final stretch of life with her modest pension and the savings her late husband had left behind. Yet instead of using that money for peace, comfort, or even a little joy, Renata placed it all on her fragile shoulders: the rent, the furniture, the groceries, the endless little emergencies. Every month, as predictable as the sunrise, she walked to the bank to transfer $500 for Max and Lena's rent. Never a late payment, never an excuse. To her, it wasn't optional, it was sacred. My son must always have a roof over his head. Even if I eat less, even if I wear old clothes, it doesn't matter. But Renata's giving didn't end with the rent. Every piece of furniture in their small apartment, the sofa, the dining table, even the refrigerator filled with food, bore the quiet imprint of her sacrifice. On stormy days, she trudged to the supermarket, filled her cart with fresh vegetables, milk, and meat, and carried it all to Max and Lena's home. She placed each item carefully on their shelves as if arranging proof of her love. She remembered nights when she herself had eaten nothing more than beans and stale bread, just to save enough to buy Lena a smart office dress she had admired. Whenever she watched Max and Lena lounge comfortably on that sofa she had bought, laughing as if the world had no weight, Renata's heart swelled with warmth. The lines of fatigue on her face deepened, her hands trembled from age, but her spirit whispered, "As long as my son is happy, it is all worth it." And beneath every transfer, every purchase, every sacrifice, a single dream took root, one that sustained her: the wedding. For 3 years, she clung to the vision of a gentle, joyous day when she would sit proudly in the front row, watching Max slip a ring on Lena's finger, her eyes blurred with tears of pride. She pictured herself in the pale pink dress she had chosen so carefully, wearing new shoes that shone under the light, clutching a small bouquet. The photographs would capture it all, the proof that her decades of devotion had blossomed into the happiness of her only child. She prepared for that day as one prepares for a sacred pilgrimage. Quietly, she saved $1,000 to give as a wedding gift, imagining Max's face lighting up with gratitude, Lena hugging her tightly, whispering thank you. She had even called her sister Diana in Chicago, her voice trembling with pride: "I'm finally going to see my son get married. Please come. I want you beside me on this special day." For Renata, that wedding wasn't just their union, it was her redemption, the ultimate consolation after years of widowhood, a validation that her life of sacrifice meant something. When she finally tallied everything, the sum was staggering: more than $33,000 in 3 years. Money that could have taken her across Europe, renovated her home, or simply given her the security and dignity she deserved. Instead, it flowed steadily into Max and Lena's lives, ensuring that they would never know the taste of true hardship. And yet, beneath her giving heart, there lingered a quiet ache. She sometimes wondered, do they really appreciate this? Does Max realize that his mother has traded her old age for his comfort? But whenever his eyes flicked toward her, she brushed the thought aside, soothing herself: "Don't be foolish. What matters is that they are happy." The rhythm of sacrifice became her entire existence: each month the transfer, each week the groceries, each holiday the gifts. Her house remained silent, filled only with the tick of the clock and the neat stack of receipts in her drawer. In contrast, Max and Lena's apartment brimmed with warmth, with cool air from the unit she had paid to repair, with laughter echoing off furniture she had bought. And all of it, all the years, all the money, all the quiet deprivations, was meant to purchase just one thing: a place at her son's wedding. A seat in the front row. A smile of recognition. A fleeting moment of belonging in the life she had poured everything into. That fragile hope was what kept her going, what allowed her to endure the hunger, the worn clothes, the loneliness. She believed that one day, in that church or that hall, when she saw her son vow his love, she would finally feel that her own love had not been wasted. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, when Renata finally picked up the phone, her voice trembling with the mix of anticipation and fear that had haunted her for months. She had rehearsed the question 100 times in her head: "Max, when will the wedding be? She wanted to sound casual, as if she weren't waiting for that day like a starving woman waits for bread. But before Max could speak, it was Lena who answered. She looked directly at Renata with a smile that was too sweet, too sharp, and said words that pierced deeper than any knife. "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." For a moment, time stopped. The phone grew heavy in Renata's hand, as though it had turned into iron. The room seemed to tilt, the air collapsing around her. Special people. The phrase echoed in her skull like a cruel bell. She, who had paid their rent for 3 years, who had furnished their home, who had filled their fridge when they had nothing, she was not special. Her mind raced to the pink dress hanging in her closet, the one she had chosen with such care, thinking of how it would look in wedding photographs. Beside it sat the new shoes, never worn, polished for a day that now would never come. And in her drawer, tucked away in a white envelope, lay $1,000 in crisp bills, the wedding gift she had saved penny by penny, denying herself small comforts so she could place it in Max's hand with pride. All of it useless now. All of it a foolish dream. She stood in her own living room, in her own house, while Lena lounged on the very sofa Renata had bought for them. Max avoided her eyes, as if ashamed, but not ashamed enough to stop the charade. The words Lena had spoken rang louder and louder in Renata's ears, only special people. That night, unable to sleep, Renata reached for her phone. A part of her, wounded and desperate, still clung to hope that perhaps it was true, that maybe it had been only a small ceremony, just them and 2 witnesses, as Max would later claim. But as she scrolled through Facebook, the last pieces of her illusion shattered. There, glowing from the screen, was a live stream of the wedding. She watched it unfold as if she were a ghost peering into a world where she did not exist. Lena, radiant in her white gown, the same gown Renata had unknowingly financed with the $800 she had given her the month before. Max, smiling nervously, slipping a ring on her finger. Around them, a crowd of laughing faces, Lena's parents, raising their glasses, her siblings clinking champagne flutes, friends cheering with joy. Everyone was there. Everyone except her. Renata's hand shook so violently she almost dropped the phone. She replayed the video again and again, each time hoping she had misseen, that somewhere in the background she might catch a glimpse of herself, sitting unnoticed at a corner table. But no. She was not there. She had never been there. Her humiliation deepened with every passing frame. The livestream's comments scrolled across the screen, beautiful couple. So happy for you, Lena. The perfect wedding. Each word was another lash across her heart. She imagined what her own friends might say if they saw this, friends she had told about the upcoming wedding, friends who believed she would be sitting proudly beside her son. Instead, she was alone in the dark, staring at a celebration where she was not wanted. The betrayal was complete. Renata pressed the phone to her chest, tears burning her eyes. She remembered the thousands of dollars she had funneled into their lives, the nights she had gone without so they could have more. She remembered calling her sister Diana, her voice trembling with joy, telling her to come from Chicago for the wedding. How could she now explain this disgrace? That she hadn't even been invited to the one event she had lived for? It was not just exclusion. It was erasure. They had erased her from the narrative of her own son's life, as though she were already dead. Renata lay awake until morning, her pillow damp with tears, her body trembling with anger and sorrow. For the first time in years, she did not imagine her son's happiness. She imagined only the hollow emptiness of being discarded, used up, left out like yesterday's newspaper. The words repeated in her mind, each syllable a poison. Only special people. And she finally understood. To them, she had never been special. She had only been useful. A week passed, though for Renata it felt like an eternity of silence. She moved through her days as if underwater, heavy and slow, every thought dragging her back to those 4 poisoned words. She had imagined grief before, when her husband died, when she grew old and alone, but nothing compared to the humiliation of being erased from her son's most important day. Then, on the 7th day, the phone rang. The name on the screen froze her in place, Lena. Against her better judgment, Renata answered. Renata, Lena's voice was softer now, stripped of the smugness that had laced it before. This time it trembled with desperation. The rent is overdue. The landlord is threatening to evict us. You forgot to make the transfer. For a long moment, Renata said nothing. She sat there in her kitchen, gripping the phone, staring at the chipped edge of her coffee cup. Forgotten? Was that what they thought? That she had simply slipped, like an absent-minded old woman? No. She remembered perfectly. She had chosen. Lena, she said at last, and even she was startled by the calm in her own voice. Didn't I warn you? I only help special people. The silence on the line was heavier than any scream. For the first time in years, it was not Renata trembling, it was Lena. Renata, I don't understand, she stammered. We were always special to you. You're like a second mother to me. Lies. Lies wrapped in honeyed tones. The same voice that had begged for money for the wedding dress, for the honeymoon, for the rings, every step of the ceremony Renata had unknowingly financed, except the one step that mattered, being there. Renata's heart pounded, not with guilt but with a new, cold clarity. She had spent 3 years walking on eggshells, afraid that the smallest refusal would shatter the fragile illusion of love. She had been the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when treated like she was invisible. But now, a single phrase, only special people, had cracked the illusion wide open. That evening, she sat at her dining table with a pen, a notebook, and a stack of bank statements. For hours she calculated, her hands trembling not from weakness but from rage. $500 a month for rent, $18,000 in 3 years. Food and groceries, at least $200 a month, another $7,200. Furniture, gifts, medical emergencies, even the car loan they had never repaid. She added until the final sum glared up at her from the page, $33,400. $33,400. The number pulsed like a wound. It was the inheritance her husband had left so she could live her last years in peace. It was the security she had saved through decades of honest work. And she had poured it, drop by drop, into the lives of 2 adults who could not even grant her the dignity of an invitation to their wedding. Tears burned her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of shame, of years of humiliation finally finding a voice. She wept for every moment she had eaten beans and rice while they dined on her money. She wept for the woman she had become, a woman who thought she had to buy her son's love. But when morning came, something inside her shifted. She rose, looked in the mirror, and saw not just the tired eyes and the wrinkles etched by years of sacrifice. She saw something new. A hardness. A resolve. For the first time in years, she made coffee without thinking of Max. She did not check her phone in hope of an apology that would never come. She sat at her table, the same table where she had once planned surprises for them, counted their bills, and cried over their indifference, and she claimed it back for herself. That was the morning Renata awoke. Not from sleep, but from the dream she had been living. The dream that love could be bought. The dream that sacrifice guaranteed gratitude. The dream that her son still saw her as his mother, and not just as a purse with legs. Now, the dream was over. And in its place, something fiercer was being born. The courtroom was cold, its walls lined with silence heavier than stone. Renata sat upright in her black suit, her trembling hands folded neatly in her lap. She was 71 years old, but she had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable, her dignity, her sanity, her very right to exist as a person on trial. Across the aisle sat Max and Lena, polished for the occasion. Max in a suit that didn't fit his shoulders, Lena dressed in black as though mourning a death. Perhaps it was the death of the family they had destroyed for money. Their lawyer spoke with the ease of a man who had played this game before. He painted Renata as confused, erratic, manipulated by strangers. He spoke of paranoia, of unnecessary security cameras, of a once loving mother now turned hostile. And Lena cried on cue, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, whispering to the judge, "She's like a second mother to me." Watching her mental decline has been devastating. Renata's chest ached as she listened, not from fear but from the bitterness of hearing lies wrapped in the language of love. Then it was their turn. Her lawyer, Mr. Weber, rose slowly, his voice calm and steady. He began not with accusations but with facts. $33,400 transferred over 3 years. Receipts of rent paid, of groceries, of furniture. Statements from the pharmacist, from her neighbors, from the women of the garden club who had seen her clarity, her strength, her new life. Finally, Dr. Moore, the psychiatrist, testified with unwavering certainty, "Mrs. Richter's cognitive function is not only intact but excellent for her age. She is fully capable of managing her own affairs." The lies began to crumble. Under cross-examination, Lena faltered when asked the last time she had called Renata without asking for money. Max could not explain why a 35-year-old man still depended on his mother's pension. The courtroom began to see what Renata had known all along: this was not concern. This was greed dressed in filial piety. And then it was Renata's turn to stand. She walked to the witness stand slowly, each step heavy with years of sacrifice. Her voice, when it came, was steady, sharper than she expected. She told her story, of 3 years of rent and groceries, of 1,000 tiny humiliations, of being erased from her son's wedding. She spoke not like a victim, but like a woman who had finally opened her eyes. "Why did you stop supporting them?" the judge asked gently. Renata lifted her chin, her voice ringing clear through the chamber, "Because I finally understood that what I was receiving was not love. It was a transaction. My money was welcome, but I as a person was not." Silence followed. A silence so pure it seemed the entire room held its breath. The judge leaned forward, his expression grave yet resolute. "This court finds Mrs. Renata Richter in full possession of her mental faculties. The request for guardianship is denied. All financial decisions remain solely hers." Renata's heart pounded. She had won. Not just the case, not just the legal right to her money, but something far greater. She had won back her freedom, her dignity, her voice. Max lowered his head, avoiding her eyes. Lena's face twisted, the mask slipping to reveal fury. But Renata no longer cared. Their anger no longer chained her. As she walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight, she felt lighter than she had in decades. The air was no longer suffocating. The sky no longer gray. Around her, Mr. Weber shook her hand firmly, her friends embraced her, and Eleanor whispered through tears, "You did it. You're free." And Renata smiled, not the smile of a woman who had been saved, but of one who had saved herself. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table, the same table that had once been covered with bills and tears, and for the first time it was empty. No rent due, no transfers pending, no demands pressing on her shoulders. Only silence, the most beautiful silence she had ever known. 3 months after the trial, Renata stood at the doorway of her old house one final time. The walls that had once echoed with her silent weeping, the rooms that had held so many memories of sacrifice, now stood empty. For years, this place had been her prison, a shrine to her endless giving. Now, it was nothing more than bricks and shadows. She sold it without regret. With the money, she chose something smaller, brighter, a modest apartment near the city center with wide windows that let in the morning sun. The first night she slept there, she awoke to a strange sensation, quiet joy. For the first time in decades, she did not wake to the weight of obligation. No one was waiting for her to pay their rent. No one was expecting her to open her wallet before she even opened her eyes. Her days began to bloom. She visited Eleanor more often, and through her she met new friends, women who, like her, had carried the heavy burden of family exploitation and had somehow found the courage to put it down. They gathered in gardens, over cups of coffee, sharing stories and laughter, not because they needed anything from each other, but because they wanted to be there. Renata traveled, too. She went to Paris, to Rome, to Vienna, places she had once seen only on postcards. She stood before paintings she had studied in books, walked streets where every corner seemed alive with history. For the first time, her money was not vanishing into someone else's pocket. It was creating memories for her. She took up painting again, something she had abandoned long ago. The smell of oils and the sweep of brushes on canvas awakened a part of her she had forgotten, the young woman who once had dreams, before life turned her into a provider and nothing more. She painted flowers, landscapes, even portraits of the women in her new circle. They called her work vibrant, alive. She smiled, because that was exactly how she felt. At night, on her balcony overlooking the city, she sometimes thought of Max. Of the boy who once hugged her so tightly, whispering she was the best mom in the world. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who had seen her only as a bank account with legs. It hurt, still. But the hurt no longer ruled her. It no longer defined her days. Instead, she whispered to the stars, "True love cannot be bought. And freedom is never too expensive." And with those words, she felt her heart expand, not in sorrow, but in peace. She was no longer the woman who begged for scraps of affection, who mistook money for love. She had been reborn. Her name was Renata Richter. She was 72 years old. And for the first time in her life, she was truly free.